Good morning, students. This is Asha, your social science teacher. We are discussing chapter 1 in Civics Equality. Today is the fourth lecture, and today we are going to discuss different forms of equality or inequality existing in other parts of the world. And let's quickly recap what we studied in this whole chapter. We tried to understand what equality is, why it is so important in democratic setup, and we tried to understand whether India has equality in full sense or not. And to understand that, we discussed three stories. We through the Kanta story, we tried to understand the economic equality, the equality between rich and poor, work condition, health condition, living condition. We try to understand whether economic equality exists in India or not. And then we try to understand caste inequality, which was very prevalent in India through the story of Om Prakash Valmiki. This is one kind of inequality which India still faces. And third kind of inequality which we were trying to understand is uh, religious inequality. People are treated differently on the basis of their religion. So these are the different three types of inequalities which we studied in this chapter. Then in the last part we studied the dignity of a person. It should not be violated, and it is violated when we treat anybody differently. We try to recognize the dignity of each and every individual. And most important part, equality is a key feature of democracy. So how does a democratic government ensures that equality is there in society? So there are two ways in which government tries to bring equality in society. First is through laws, as second is through programs. We studied different laws which are there in our constitution to ensure equality is there in country, and there were some government programs and scheme. There are many, and we discussed about midday meal program. How does a midday meal program ensures greater equality, and how it is beneficial for children as well, for their health and nutrition point of view. So after studying whole going through the whole chapter, we see that there are so many inequalities, and there is a lot which government is doing. But does India is the only country where there is an inequality? In fact, there are many more other democratic countries where there is inequality. I'm using the word democratic because dictatorship you cannot expect anything. But in democratic government, we do expect equality. It is a key feature of democratic government. So there are many other democracies where there is an equality going on. And we'll take one such example of Afro Americans. Prior to 1950s, the African Americans were treated extremely unequally in the USA and denied equality through law. In fact, in America, there were different schools, different colleges. um, Everything was different from them for black and white Americans. The black Americans or the Afro Americans, they came to America way back in 15th and 16th centuries. They were brought, in fact, they were brought there as slaves, and they have spent more than 3 to 4 centuries in America, and they were still not given basic rights. They were not treated equally over there. That's and the Civil Rights Act was passed in the year 1964, and the act prohibited the discrimination on the basis of race, religion, and national origin. So, children, do you know in even in the bus, uh, there was a sitting arrangement like Afro Americans have to sit at the back, and in case any white American comes, they have to leave their place. So, this bus incidents gave rise to a civil right movement. It was Rosa Parks. She had a hard day at work. After working whole day, she was tired and she was sitting in a bus. And man came and he asked for a seat. She refused to give her seat to that man, and that gave rise to a whole big agitation for in the African American for their basic right. and this whole movement was called Civil Rights Act. Afro Americans were living in America from 15th and 16th century, but they did not even had a voting right. After this civil right movement, they got voting right, and all kinds of discrimination was prohibited on the basis of race, religion, and national origin. After this act, it also stated that all schools would be open for African American children and that they would no longer have to attend separate school. So under this law, it was also mandatory that all school will be taking Afro American children. Earlier, there were separate school for Africans, Afro Americans, and separate school for Americans. They had a different schools as well. However, but the major concern is majority of African American continue to among the poorest in the country. So there have been laws made, but still, if you go, you will see that most of the poor people in America are Afro American, and even the school, Afro American children are forced to study in government schools, which have less facilities when compared to American schools and the private schools. The same situation had been in South Africa. There was a racial discrimination on the basis of color, and they have a political system apartheid, which you studied in grade 6. They have separate churches, schools, colleges for black and white. And in 1994, they got independence, and Nelson Mandela was the first president of South Africa. Same way in this Afro American movement, which is famous by the name of Civil Rights Act, Martin Luther King was the main leader who was leading this agitation of the movement. But they got equality uh, after a strong struggle. So that's all about this chapter, children. By this, we come to an end of this chapter, and let's quickly do some key terms of this chapter. So we are going to discuss the important key terms of this chapter. The first key term here, which we are going to discuss, is equality. Abolition of privileges to groups and providing equal opportunities to all persons inhabiting the state. So equality means abolition of special provision and giving equal opportunity to all persons. The next is key elements of democracy. Key elements of democracy we have already discussed: people's participation, resolution of conflict, as well as equality and justice. These are the four important key elements of democracy. Next is democracy, a government of people, by the people, and for the people. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's the democracy. Universal adult franchise. This is very important aspect of democratic society. It means that all adult, those who are 18 and above citizen, have right to vote irrespective of their social or economic background. That is universal adult franchise. Now next, dignity. This refers to thinking of oneself and other person as worthy of respect. Dignity means giving equal respect to themselves and the other person as well. Constitution. This is a document that lays down basic rules and regulation for people and government in the country to follow. So you can say this is a document that it's an important document which lays basic rules and regulation. Now the last, civil rights movement, a movement that began in USA in 1950s, in which African American people demanded equal rights and end to racial discrimination. So children, that's all for today. Tomorrow we will discuss book exercises. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.